Hello, everyone, and welcome to the People's Forum. I see a few new faces. Is anyone here for the first time? Okay, that really warms my heart, you guys. Hello, and welcome to the People's Forum. My name is Kate. I help run 1804 Books, which is the bookstore you passed on your way in. If you haven't heard of the People's Forum before, this is a really amazing space. We offer, obviously, book talks. We have classes that run. We have a revolutionary summer school every year that just finished up. We also have movie screenings, all kinds of events. If your organization has an event, you can also even have it here. So, wherever you are, however you're involved in your community, be sure to stay in touch. Follow us on social media, our newsletters. Even if you're not in the city, hello to all the live stream viewers. A lot of our offerings are hybrid, so be sure to stay tuned into what we're up to. I'm really excited for tonight's event, a book talk on becoming abolitionists with the author Derecka Purnell and, of course, Nyle Fort. This book is really amazing because, it charts a journey into realizing abolition as a really it's a realistic way of living life in terms of how we build community care around each other and not rely on police forces that are bloated with budgets and all that kind of stuff to, harm our communities and hurt people who are already so oppressed by the state. So I'm really excited to hand it over to these two wonderful people. Of course, we have Derecka, who's the author herself, who is a human rights lawyer, researcher, and organizer. Yeah. This bio will not do her justice, but just to do it really quickly, she works to end police and prison violence by providing legal assistance, research, and training in community-based organizations through an abolitionist framework. She received her JD from Harvard Law and her BA from the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and studied public policy and economics at UC Berkeley. Her writing has been published everywhere. I'm sure you've all seen it. She's already appeared everywhere on TV, and she's currently a columnist at The Guardian and a scholar in residence at Columbia Law School. We're also joined by Nyle Fort, who has earned his PhD in religion and interdisciplinary humanities in Princeton University. He is currently writing a book on African American mourning with a particular focus on how public acts of grief shape and are shaped by Black politics. And he is currently a postdoctoral fellow in Columbia University's Society of Fellows. A quick intro, but I'm sure they'll get into the juice of everything a lot more. Thank you so much, and thank you all for joining us. Stay in touch.
What's up, everybody? How y'all doing? Come on, y'all could do better than that. How y'all doing? All right. I want to shout out the People's Forum for putting this amazing event together. I was laughing before we came up here. Does anybody know MTV Unplugged? Y'all remember MTV? Doesn't this feel very MTV Unplugged-y? I mean, we could move the chairs and just start like, hey, everybody put your... All right. I thought that would land harder. I'm just so grateful to be here, so grateful to be in conversation with Derecka. Before we start talking to you or talking to each other, we actually wanted you all to talk to each other. And so you may know the person next to you, but if you do, maybe like kind of move like that if you can, and just ask the person's name, ask where they're from, or you can say, guess where I'm from. I don't know, just be interesting. But just take like a minute. If online is working, tell people where you are from online. So just take a minute, say hi, get to know each other. All right, y'all having too much fun. I'm not a If you hear my voice, clap once. If you hear my voice, clap twice. All right, y'all was having a good time. Like, we're still here for this book, y'all, okay? So I just want to say briefly how I met Derecka, if that's all right. And then, because you can hear the formal like bio, and it could be a lot longer when it comes to Derecka. But there's like the real story behind the resume, behind the bio. So I met Derecka outside of the Ferguson Police Department during the 1-year anniversary of Michael Brown's shooting death. Of course, Michael Brown Jr. was 18 years old, Black teenager. He was shot and killed by a white police officer, Darren Wilson, in Ferguson, Missouri. Anybody remember that time? 2014. This was a year after. I met Derecka outside the police department, and immediately I could just feel how serious she was about freedom. You know, like this wasn't like a field trip for Derecka. This was something that was really impactful in terms of how she was thinking about revolution. And to see her from 2015 to 2022, 7 years later, when I read the book and I hear some of the stories that she's telling, being able to remember that time, I'm just so grateful for you, because some people are very good writers, but they're not very good people. Y'all probably know some of those people. None of them are you, but you know somebody. Some people are very smart, but they're not very wise. Derecka's dope because she's all that. And she really comes out of struggle from St. Louis. We'll talk about that. But I just wanted to just share like briefly where I met Derecka and that she's really about this life. And I'm really grateful. So, all right, of course. So I wanna start with the hard questions. One is, who's gonna win the NBA championship this year?
Who is gonna win the NBA championship this year? Who do I want to win, or who actually might win?
Who's gonna win?
Off the record, probably Golden State.
Ooh.
No,
oh, we got some fans.
I'm not happy.
Okay.
I'm not happy about that.
All right. Next question. Who's a better freestyler, me or you?
Oh, absolutely me.
That's sad.
Absolutely
lies.
me.
Fake news. Okay. What made you write this book, and what made you write this book when you wrote this book?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Wow, it's like one of the few warm days, and y'all decided to be indoors here with me and with us. So thank you so much. What made me write this book? In 2020, an editor from The Atlantic reached out to me and asked if I could write about abolition, because there were all these uprisings in the aftermath of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery being killed by police. And there was this point where abolition had sort of hit the mainstream. And I had been writing about abolition, I guess maybe 3 or 4 years before being invited to write this piece for The Atlantic. But they were mostly self-published pieces, because when I would pitch pieces about abolition, as you can imagine, I didn't get replies back on those emails. They still in my in my draft, so I haven't gotten responses right. So when I got this chance to write this, I said, okay, and I don't know if you probably remember, I was like, okay, well, if I had one shot to write in a mainstream publication about abolition, what is it that I would say? And at the time, I was particularly angry because there are a lot of liberal mayors, a lot of Black mayors, who were telling Black people in ghettos and exploited neighborhoods that all of these white people are coming from the suburbs to tell you to abolish and defund the police. And they're going back home to the suburbs with their well-funded police departments. This is like a white thing. These are outside agitators. And it just was incredibly frustrating, because the versions of abolition, the traditions of abolition I belong to, were like created by radical Black feminists, right? We're created by people who, span across race, class, age, really intergenerational. And so I decided to write the initial piece in 2020, as someone who grew up in a Black ghetto in St. Louis, and said, well, by saying that abolition is this white thing, you're dismissing all of the Black abolitionists who come from these sorts of communities too, and that's just not true. So I was very angry. So I wrote the piece, and I started off with, we call 911 for everything except snitching, because it's true. It was true. Like, it's like, okay, there's a fire, there's something that's happening, there's any number of situations, because when you don't have a lot of resources, 911 can become everything. My sister was having nosebleeds. It was like, okay, call 911, because ain't no clinics, ain't no Obamacare, ain't no universal health care, no primary care doctor. We don't even know why her nose was bleeding so much, So when those things would happen, 911 came the default response. And people took that default response to say, see, look, people need police, right? Instead of saying, well, why are people calling 911 in the first place? And there are other ways to address that. And so by the time I was thinking about before I was thinking about writing the book, I was thinking about going to a PhD program. And it was Robin Kelly, a historian at UCLA, my favorite historian on the planet, one of my favorite people on the planet, even though he's a Pisces. One of my favorite people on the planet was like, don't go into a PhD program, write this book. And I was like, I can't write a book, that's ridiculous. And then when I don't know where my editor just went, Alessandra, when we finally landed that, okay, I might actually write this book, she really pushed me to include some of the narrative pieces in the text, and I was very resistant. I was like, I don't want to write about my life. I want to write a certain kind of political text and make certain kind of arguments. And she said, well, I think it would be important for people to understand that how you are right now wasn't how you always were, and to feel less pressure about understanding what you guys are talking about. So after lots of fights and lots of emails, I said, okay, I'll try. And that's how the book ultimately became written. And the last thing I'll say is that I noticed that there were a lot of people in that 2020 moment who were really excited to identify as abolitionists, but didn't see abolition as a part of a broader set of liberatory politics, right? So there were people who were excited to be abolitionists, but weren't curious about their analyses around capitalism or homophobia or ableism, right? And I would be like, well, it's important to think about all these things alongside each other. And so while the book is called Becoming Abolitionist, I really tried to cover all these other sets of radical politics so that people can see we must constantly learn new ways of being in relationship to each other.
Yeah, I mean, part of what's so impressive to me about the text, and we talked about a lot of things that we're going to talk about tonight, but one of the things to me that's so impressive about the text is actually the way you wrote it. So what people in academia would call interdisciplinary, but what you could just say is you use a lot of different ways to do the thing, to tell the argument, to make the point. You use history, sociology, ethnography, criminology, humor, music. And you also use memoir. You talked about your personal story, and anyone who has read the book has had the gift of learning not only about Derecka's politics, but about Derecka's upbringing and how she got to this point, which is very powerful. I was thinking about your book in light of what seems to be almost an explosion of Black memoirs. I think Imani Perry actually wrote a piece called The Year of the Black Memoir. I think that was like 2017 or so. So everybody's heard of Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me. And so you have this moment where people are learning about race and learning about social inequality through people's personal stories. And so people have described your books in all ways, memoir being one of them. And I want you to talk a little bit about what you see as the possibilities of the memoir as a genre of the personal storytelling, and what's some of the challenges or limitations of that kind of form?
Wow, yeah, that's a really important question. I resist calling this book a memoir for so many different reasons. One, because there's so many cool things about my life that I didn't write about that's like not in the book. Actual cool things. And so I'm just like, well, if I actually wrote a memoir, I would write about so many other things. I would include like a much broader, my grandma has like really funny beef with Maya Angelou. I would write that in the book. That's not in this book, but I would write that in a memoir because it's cool. She was like, Still I Rise. What's that? And I was like, Grandma. And so my grandma was a poet, very, very beautiful lady. So yeah, I resist calling it a memoir. I think that the way that I've heard it described, those parts, those narrative parts that I've heard that I've liked the most is like it's a political autobiography. So there's narrative, there's factual me recounting, different parts of my life, but it's again kind of towards like it's setting the stage for a particular set of introduction to politics. And I think that there's a lot of possibilities with that because, again, when you see someone, when I think about my generation, in the book, I talk about Elizabeth Alexander, how she calls us the Trayvon generation, like the people who were organizing in 2012 in the aftermath of Trayvon Martin's murder by George Zimmerman. I have since seen police killings go viral over and over and over again, right? So this generation who was really politicized through that killing and who fought to get someone arrested. I remember like doing petitions to get George Zimmerman arrested, to get people arrested, and then watching Michael Brown get killed and fighting to get cops arrested, and then learning the limitations of convictions and arrests and sending killer cops to jail, all of that. And then constantly being pushed by people who were more curious than I was, who were more courageous than I was, to think more critically about the world. And so then by the time we were like espousing abolitionist politics 5-10 years later after this uprising, it can see like, oh, you already sort of have all of this down. And so what writing through this memoir-ish political biographical like method, what it does is show like, oh yeah, I thought there are so many things I've said when I was in my early 20s that were like very popular and very wrong. Very wrong. It just got a lot of likes online, but it was so wrong, right? It was so wrong. And having sets of humility to be like, oh yeah, I thought this about the world. One of my really good friends, Louisa, is here right now. And when we met in 2011, we got into a huge fight over abortion, a huge fight. Because I was like, I'm pro-life. Like, how could someone do this? And because of people like Louisa being like, yeah, sis, the world don't work like that. And deciding to be in a relationship with me and in community with me and push me and challenge me, like my ideas shifted radically because people took time to do that. And so part of the book, and Louisa shows up in the book actually, part of the book, what it's doing, what I hope that it does is introducing people through my life who challenged me to change my thinking. And unfortunately, I always attribute everything back to social media. I say, oh, because of the internet, because of kids these days, because I guess I'm getting older. But I think because of social media, there's this idea that once you're introduced to something that's like progressive or radical, that you're supposed to either agree with it right away or it's not worthwhile. And so when I hear people say, abolition and defund, it's not polling well in Black communities, it's like, well, some people just heard about it yesterday. Some people just heard about it 2 years ago. It took my mom 6 years to like get to a point where we had some conceptual understanding of what we both meant when we were saying abolition. And that kind of slow work, it's important and it takes time. And so I think a positive of writing the book that way is that you see that, oh, okay, this is where she was at 14 and 13 when she was a student activist. And these are the kinds of questions she was asking, people were asking her in college and as a lawyer and now as a parent, as a person of faith. And so I think that provides a lot of opportunity. I think the limitation of that is then that like it can feel linear. Right? Like it can feel linear, like, oh, I started here and now I'm an abolitionist. And it's like, no, like there's things I'm moving back and forth on. There's new questions I'm asking. There's new thoughts that I have. There's all these new challenges that are before me. So it can sometimes read linear because of the book, but life just doesn't, at least my life, y'all life may be linear, but my life doesn't work that way, right? There's new problems that presents new questions and new solutions and then new problems, right? So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Yeah,
I think and some, and I mean one of the things there's so much I like about the book. Clearly, one of the things that I think sometimes storytelling becomes insular, so you start and stop with the person's story, and then the story gets in the way of the argument. The sentences are so beautiful. Before you know it, you're like, wow, what is it about? I don't know. It just made me feel really like things are possible. But you're also very specific. You make real arguments. And I actually want to point out, first I want to read a couple of sentences because they are beautiful. Can I do that? Is that all right, y'all? Okay, let's start here. It's on page 3 of my copy. I got an old copy though. But over time, I came to realize that in reality, the police were a placebo. Calling them felt like something, as the legal scholar Michelle Alexander explains. And something feels like everything when your option is nothing. That's cold-blooded, y'all. That's just good. Can I do one more? Is that all right? I'm from the Black church, so we ask questions when you heard it? All right, I'm from the Black church, so where we at? Oh, this is a good one right here. It's on my page 7. The police officers who are doing the, quote, right thing maintain the systems of inequality and ableism in Black communities. The right thing is wrong. That's cold-blooded too. So I want to go to this other point, though, that you make talking about arguments, because I think this is actually one of the things that stands in the way of the kind of project of abolition that you put forward. And it's right here on my second page. I just want to read it because I don't want to get it wrong. When people come across police abolition for the first time, they tend to dismiss abolitionists for not caring about neighborhood safety or the victims of violence. They tend to forget that often we are those victims, those survivors of violence too. So I want you to talk a little bit about that quotation and about the idea that abolitionists don't care about violence and all that stuff.
Yes, of course. It's similar to what I was saying about the mayors. Like, there's this idea that abolitionists are over here, survivors over here, victims are over here, people who commit harm are over here, as if those categories are not fluid at all the time. Like, I remember for one of these exercises that I do with community-based organizations, I'll ask people, we can just do it now. I'll say, raise your hand if if someone ever stolen anything from you. Put them up. Raise your hand if you've ever stolen something from somebody else. Whole Foods absolutely count, but I support all theft from Whole Foods. If you don't steal from Whole Foods, something's wrong. Okay, yes. So what happens is then, I'm serious, if you're not stealing orange juice, then, well, anyway, so, yes, I think what happens is that the idea that someone's just like a perpetrator, like someone is like out to get you, and it doesn't recognize that, yeah, we also hurt people too. We commit all kinds of harms. And so, yeah, we have these shifting identities all the time. And so, but that happens a lot with people with radical politics. It's just like, okay, I saw something, I don't know if this was in Charles Blow piece, something I read in some piece in the last few weeks was just like, abolitionists aren't gonna win over, voters with this defund stuff. As if abolitionists don't vote. It's like, what do you mean we're not gonna win over voters? But again, it's the siloing that is actually a really important tactic of polarization. Because when you have a dominant narrative where you're polarizing groups of people and you say, these are abolitionists and these are survivors, it makes survivors the side that you want to be on. Like, it's an important tactic. And I think polarization too for the left is also a very important tactic. It's like, what we do, which side are you on? That y'all supposed to say the people's side. Like, which side are you on, right? The people's side. So that happens, like, we don't have a monopoly on that tactic. And so when people, try to say, oh, y'all don't care about Black women, and I get this from Black women. I get that, like, I'm not a Black woman. Like, I don't have knotless braids right now. I was like, oh, you don't care about Black women. You're trying to, remove, what's the one that happened when Colin Kaepernick's company published Abolition for the People? There was an interesting set of backlash from people who say they were Black women online, but I'm sure they actually included groups of Black women who said, don't put a dark-skinned Black woman on the cover of this book because abolition is harmful for Black women. Black women die at the hands of Black men, and what you're trying to do is remove a lever of accountability that Black women have. And so that's why in chapter 5 and chapter 6, I specifically talk about why Black women call 911, why they rely on the police, why they rely on incarceration. And when presented with other options, like, do you want this person to go to prison or do you want the harm to stop? It's like, well, I want the harm to stop. I know jail is messed up. Maybe I want this person to go to jail. I just know we want the violence to end. Or I want an apology. Or like my mom and me, I just want my stuff back. Just give me my stuff back. I don't care if you go to jail. Give me my money back, my bike back, my clothes back, my chain back. Y'all seen the Irreplaceable video by Beyonce. Run the things that I got you. Like, that is what I experience a lot when people are calling the police. Like, this person has my stuff, and this is the only way that I know how to solve this problem. And so I think that tactic of polarization really pulls people to be like, oh, okay, it's abolitionists versus survivors. When we look at early critical resistance, their literature, when we look at Insight, right? This is a group of Black women who were coming and having all of these debates with people in critical resistance in the late 90s about, okay, there's survivors of domestic violence and interpersonal harm who are nervous about abolition because like prison is what they think keeps them safe. And how do we make sure people feel safe? How do we provide alternatives? How do we reduce and eliminate and prevent harm? So these questions and debates have been happening for like 30 years, right? But it's new into the mainstream. And so then you assume because you don't know about it that it doesn't exist, right? So that is what's happening. And then you have people who have the opportunity to know. They have the resources to know. I'm thinking about President Obama, y'all's favorite president. When President Obama tweets things like, or says things like, defund the police, nobody knows what that means. What he's doing is playing on the sympathies of people who actually may not know what that means. And he's showing that, like, look, we don't know what this means. But this man with, Occidental College BA, went to Columbia, and then Harvard Law School, then taught law at U Chicago, is now president of the United States. He can't figure out what defund the police means. And so it's, again, that tactic of like, we just don't know. We just don't. I don't even remember the question no more, but I know that makes me mad. Like when that happens, because again, you're playing on the sympathies of people who actually want to know. When these debates have been happening for a long time, and it's on us to show that, look, this question isn't novel, and we should continue to ask it, and we should also answer it. We should experiment with how to answer this question and practice it. But we shouldn't just default to there is no answer or it doesn't exist, because that's just simply not true.
Yeah, that's so good. How are y'all doing? Are y'all good? Y'all listening in? Okay, check on your neighbor that you talked to earlier. Ask them if they okay. Still good, still here. If they're texting, just give them that look, like, really? No, that was so good. Sometimes it's so good, you gotta take a pause and be like, let that sit for a second. Let that sit for a second. There's so much. Anybody have a time check? What time it is? 7:15? Okay, we got a little time. So I want to stick with this just a little bit, and then we can kind of bust a move to the right or the left. Part of what you're saying, Chimamanda talks about it as the danger of a single story.
Yeah.
And I'm sure some of you in here have heard somebody kind of say, well, we should default to the people who are directly impacted. And maybe some folks are in here are directly impacted, however we conceive of that. So I want to talk a little bit about that danger of a single story and the authority of the directly impacted, and how that sometimes stands in the way of the project of abolition. Well, we need to listen to those who've been most affected. Does that make sense? The sort of politics of the directly impacted.
Yes. Oh, this is a tricky question. Yes. Wow. Where to even start with this? I think I'll start by saying that there has been, for decades now, but especially since 2014, an earnest attempt to dismantle how we privilege, who's worthy of listening to. And part of that, it's when we say center Black women, right? Or center the most marginalized. There are these earnest attempts to say this group of people have been intentionally ignored, kept out of particular spaces, not paid attention to, literally abused, killed. We need to focus our efforts on centering, listening to, uplifting, amplify what particular groups are doing. And I think that those earnest attempts matter. And when they come from our movements, then it's like exciting and important, and it's something that we should struggle with, you know? And I think that I have like interesting, I don't know if they're interesting, I think they're interesting critiques of just centering when I think of like the long tradition of like radical Black feminists and how we need to build certain kind of collectives. But I think the attempts are very earnest and very important. And then there's this, what to call it? There's liberals pick up some versions of this thing, right? When I say liberals, I'm talking about people who are mostly committed to the way things are overall and kind of want to tweak it and improve it, right? But don't want to throw it all away. They pick up versions of this movement, like ethos, I guess, and they'll say, okay, we need to like, you know, listen to people who are directly impacted, listen to people who have lived experience. And a lot of people who are formerly incarcerated, currently incarcerated. And then I noticed that the people who they're interested in listening to, they're centering, already share the politics of them. So they're not listening to like directly impacted people who are abolitionists, right? They're not censoring people with radical politics. Like that's not happening, right? But they're hiding behind that. And so that's happening right now with this jail fight in Manhattan, at Columbia, right? So there's this report that came out through the Columbia Justice Lab that was endorsing the construction of a new jail for women who are currently incarcerated at Rosie's, and then shifting them to this new woke feminist jail, okay? So it wasn't me, that's what I heard. So that's just, it's for women and gender expansive people. Because again, they're picking up our movement language, right? So gender expansive people and women, okay? And it's not gonna be like your jail. It's gonna be like a fly jail, right? It's gonna be therapy and like childcare centers. It's gonna be lit. So this is what they're selling us. And in the report, like for this jail that organizers are pushing back on, the report says, no, I already know what you're thinking. We vetted this jail with Black women who are directly impacted, and they're all on board. We did that. You know, y'all told us to do it, we did that, okay? And so then I was like, well, where in the report does it say where people disagreed? Did anyone push back? Were there any critiques of this plan? Because all jails start new and shiny, right? All jails are new at some point. Like Rikers was a fresh ass jail at one point. And now people are like dying left and right. And so it's this idea that a new physical building will somehow save these carceral realities is so frustrating, right? But the report, again, it's like, no, we listen to these Black, directly impacted, triple trans, like think about any marginalized identity, and it's like, this is what we did, you know? And so that's the single story, right? Because then you cut off people who may have critiques, who may think differently. And so I think that's something that we have to be especially mindful of, because people, you know, who've been in prison have all kinds of ideas, all kinds of disagreements. They're literally not monolithic. And we know this because this sort of approach happened with Black people, happened with any group. Who's the Black leader? Like, who's the Latinx voice? Who's the, you know, it's like, what, like, tell us what your people want. And then you get the one leader who says, you know, we want to build this jail. And like, well, that's what y'all all want. And it's like, no. So I think it's very, very dangerous. And we have to figure out when those attempts are earnest and what it means to be in genuine struggle with people who have different marginalized backgrounds, who come from exploited communities, who are in prison, formerly in prison. What it means to be in struggle with them, I think it means to take seriously their humanity, that they could be right and wrong, that you can disagree with them and agree. Like, all that has to happen. So we have to think about when we're genuinely in struggle with people, or when we just are performing some sort of deference politics, to then say, we talked to this group of people, it checked our box, we're good to go. You know, because that's not freedom work.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, yeah, go ahead. Y'all got the snaps. Love the snaps. the title of the book itself is suggestive of this isn't a single story.
Mm-hmm.
It's not called Becoming an Abolitionist. It's Becoming Abolitionists, plural. And so I think even at the level of the actual title of the book, you're already pushing back on this idea, one, that you have all the answers, that the book has all the answers, and by saying becoming, that it's a process. It's a process.
Nyle helped me come up with the title of the book.
I did help.
So he's
come
like,
up with the title. I ain't gonna lie. A few sentences. So, all right, we're talking about process. We're talking about, you know, some people call it journey, some people call it process. There's some sort of very important, I think, parts around spirituality. In part, your relationship to the church, but it's also a little bit more broad. You talked about you and Louisa arguing about abortion. So a part of your journey politically, there was also this journey spiritually that was happening. And I don't think we talk enough about spirituality in our social movements. I think either it gets reduced to the church, so it becomes about the church, whether we like the church or not, and there's lots of things not to like about the church, or it just becomes anti-spirituality. So I think I want to take a little time to talk about the importance of spirituality in your political journey and in your values. How was that happening alongside this abolitionist journey?
Oh man, it's getting deep. Do y'all remember Ricky Lake? Some of y'all, you don't remember Ricky Lake. You too young. This feels like a Ricky Lake question. Wow, my spirituality. How is it changing alongside my political development?
Yeah, I mean, how the church. It seems to me like the church was contradicting some of the things that you had been coming into politically.
Oh, absolutely.
But at the same time, I know that you're a person, you still identify as a Christian. What's that about?
Yeah, I do. Still pay them tithes, kind of. Yes, wow, where to even start? So in the book, I talk about being in college, majoring in Black studies. Actually, I don't know if I say this specific part of the book, because I haven't read the book in a while. So y'all can actually remind me if this is in the book or not. But I remember, the church that I was going to in Kansas City that I loved. I loved the people there. I loved that it was intergenerational. I loved that people took care of each other, fed each other, paid each other mortgages, watched each other's children. It just was an incredible community for me. And then I would go to church on Sundays and hear the pastor say, Black people, we're poor because we're not faithful. We don't trust God would help us. And I was just like, okay, maybe, I know a lot of Black people are real faithful and real poor. So faithfulness and poverty have a correlation. Then that just doesn't make sense, because my grandma would be rich. It would be a lot of rich people in my family. And then I would go to class. I would sit through econ classes and Black studies classes, and I would hear, Black people are poor because of slavery, right? Because of exploitation, discrimination, capitalism. And I remember going to one of my favorite pastors at the church who had a reputation for being the intellectual pastor, right? There's some pastors this pastor can preach, and this pastor can teach, but you only really know that if you know Black church stuff. So that he had a reputation for being the teacher. And I was like, pastor is saying this on Sunday about our faithfulness. And I'm going to class and I'm learning about all of these systems of oppression, right? I'm learning that Black women get paid less than white women and white men for the same kind of work. And I'm learning how people who are leaving prisons with records who are white get callbacks faster than Black men with no. I'm learning all this stuff. And I remember him telling me that if your education is making you question your faith and your teachings here, then maybe you should change your major. And I was devastated. I was like, change my major? That just feels, really, really, really extreme. And by the time, Trayvon Martin was killed, I do share this story in the book, I know for sure. When Trayvon Martin was killed, I remember the same pastor, not the teacher, but the preacher, he had all of the Black men come to the front of the room, to the front of the church, to stand at the altar. And he's praying and praying and praying. And he says, God, please save the souls of all of these black men, because if they get killed by a white supremacist or a vigilante, I want to make sure that their souls go to heaven. And I was like, what kind of God would send someone to hell after being killed by a white supremacist? You know? Like, what kind of God would be like, no, 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 no. You should have got saved. Too bad you got killed. You got to go to heaven. I was so angry at the possibility. I was like, oh, I don't want that God. Like, I don't want that God. So I called one of my friends, JP, who I met through Children's Defense Fund. We were Freedom School trainers and teachers together. And he introduced me to Trinity United Church of Christ, which was Pastor Jeremiah Wright's church in Chicago. So when all the controversy happened around Obama and his pastor saying, God damn America, this was the pastor that he distanced himself from. And I was like, let me see what they're talking about, because I like that goddamn American energy. That's kind of where I am. And so I started streaming Trinity United Church of Christ. And it was like, wow, like it's very possible, you know, to belong to a faith tradition and to have this kind of community and to be in a space where someone can use the pulpit as a social space, as a spiritual space to critique capitalism, militarism, homophobia. I was shocked. And so I felt lucky to have political spaces that did that. And I also wanted to grow as a person with a community. And I think church did and continues, the right kinds of church that I belong to, it continues to do that in a way that's like, that feels intergenerational, in a way that I need, in a way that I desire, right? Where someone who's 6 years old all the way up to, 80 are sitting on the same row, listening, absorbing the same sorts of mess. Like, that is important to me. That feels like family. And I love movement spaces that replicate versions of that. So I think the reason why I still call myself a Christian is because I do believe in the revolutionary potential of the kind of like God that I believe in. And I do think that being Black and knowing the relationship of Black people to Christianity, it's an important home for me. It's an important home for me, and it's a site of struggle for me. And so that's why I think, and to annoy like the rights and like, oh yeah, like I'm a Christian too, bro. That's wrong. Like it feels right. It feels good to say that. But yeah, it's true. It's a home for me.
Thank you so much. What time is it, y'all? 7:30. Okay, we're gonna end in a minute. Y'all got some questions? No, because I can't keep asking questions. I'll ask maybe one or two more, and then we'll open it up. You have a question? Okay. Well, was that a? All right. In a minute, I got you first. Wow, there's so much. I'm gonna throw some stuff out there, and you figure out what you want to talk about.
Okay.
There's so much. Let me say real quick though, what's super dope too about the way you talk about abolition and other folks as well is that abolition is also about defending traditions. Mm-hmm. It's about protecting life and not just abolishing structures. So when you and the way you respond to bad faith is with good faith. So it's like you don't have to throw it all away, and providing different kinds of options and ways of being. You see what I'm saying? It's like, oh, there's some bad activists. I won't be an activist. Well, let's just be a better activist. So I think that's really fly and really dope. So you talk about internationalism a lot. Mm-hmm. You don't stay in the United States. You're all over the world. You're in South Africa. You're in Amsterdam. You're talking about the politics of British India. I mean, you're all over. So I would love to hear you talk a little bit about internationalism. But I also kind of want to end just thinking about, what are you worried about right now? And what are you excited about right now? And then I want us to open it up.
Wow. Yeah, what am I worried about? I am worried that we're going to have all the right language and all the right identities and not be absorbed into a mass political project. That our ability to articulate and define abolition won't translate into something that we can use to wield like massive political power. I'm nervous about that. Very worried about that. I'm worried that we talk about this a lot. I'm worried about what Afro-pessimism is doing to our movements. Very nervous about that. I'm worried that that people won't realize how buck like activists used to be, like how like don't realize like people used to like fight, like people who were committed to struggle, like the things that they risked for freedom. And I'm nervous about like soft life stuff that I see kind of on Instagram a little bit. I'm nervous that people won't realize like what it's gonna take for us to like to fight for the kind of freedom that we deserve. I'm nervous about that. Has anyone read Elizabeth Hinton's book, America on Fire? If you haven't, I would highly recommend that book. What that book does is document so many instances of Black people resisting police violence. Like literally from like not cops. Well, sometimes maybe they did throw cops. I don't know. I wasn't there. But throwing rocks to like unarresting people, literally engaging in shootouts, just like a wild, interesting, fascinating history. And what has happened is that our protests have gotten safer, right? We've got more people into the streets than ever, and police are on track to kill more people this year than in 2020. 26 million people hit the streets in 2020. Police about to kill more people. Like that is the reality of where we are right now. And not only are our protests becoming less revolutionary, the protections for the police are increasing. So police are becoming more violent. We're becoming more acceptable to police violence, and we're not realizing that all of these laws that get passed to then protect, police as to give police a protected class status, that diminishes our ability to like actually turn up in the streets. So I'm really nervous that it's happening passively, or that we see it online and then you retweet it and you're like, damn, like that's so messed up, shaking my head. And it's like, no. So we need more than just protests. We need people to be absorbed into organizations and to figure out how to use that absorption to then wield actual political power. Like that is what I'm most nervous about. And I think there's lots of important experiments and organizing efforts that are happening all across the country, all across the world, really. But I just know that we need much more, and it's gonna take a level of seriousness and discipline and curiosity to figure out what it's gonna to do that. That's something I'm nervous about. I also would tell people to check out Black Resistance to British Policing, because Adam Elliott Cooper does a similar work that Elizabeth Hinton does, but it does in the UK. And then what was the second one? Excited about. What am I excited about? What am I excited about? I didn't get completely lost when we took the subway here today. I got a little lost. I am such a Midwesterner, so when I'm in New York City, I'll be like, oh my God, bright lights, big city. I'm excited about that. I'm excited for what the Dream Defenders is doing in Florida. I'm excited for what a lot of coalitions that are doing in Chicago around defund and mental health interventions. I'm excited for what's happening in St. Louis with Action St. Louis and the Freedom Community Center and defund STLPD. I'm excited for the robust organizing that happened in New York City. And so hopefully towards the end, if you're working on a campaign, please shout out your campaign so people here can be absorbed into your movement and what you're doing. That's important to me, so that people are looking at the realities or confronting like the situation that we're in and are continuing to try. Like that's always exciting to me, because that's what it's gonna take for us to get free.
Can y'all clap it up, snap it up for Derecka Purnell, Becoming Abolitionists. If you read it, get it for a friend, for your mom, for your pastor, for your cousin, for your nephew. Read it to your nephew or your niece. If you haven't read it, please get it and read it, and then make sure you read it with other people. We believe in this thing called political education. Political education is different than academia or college, because we believe that we struggle around text in order to think about how to change the world. And our theory of change is that we can't change the world by ourselves. So that's why we do it together. I want to open it up for some questions, and then at the end, we are going to allow people to say, yo, this is what's going on in my neighborhood. This is what I'm working on, so that people, if they want to connect with you before we leave, can do that. So I want to start with you. You can say your name, your pronouns. You don't have to.
Hi. Sorry. My name is Luis. I'm an organizer. I definitely read the book. Really appreciate the internationalist perspective because I'm formerly an undocumented immigrant from South America, from Colombia. You know, the war on drugs. Yeah. Same people. You know, violence workers protect. Well, I won't go into the whole thing. I work with a grassroots-led organization called Vocal New York here in the city for about a month now, and we've been doing tabling in New York City based on defund, and deep canvassing. This brother right here has been with me every single day, every single week. And my question is this, that we've gotten good at, you know, meeting the other side, people who are against us. It's of course easy, super easy to, you know, meet our allies, fellow directly impacted people. Sometimes we do meet, you know, these liberals, right? And they come with arguments such as this. You see what's happening to Italy? You see what almost happened to Ilhan Omar, and when you come with this defund shit or this abolitionist shit, is what they say, because I believe in all of that, right? But when you come with this shit, you are taking the chances that we have of actually winning. And because of you, we're gonna wind up becoming, you know, Trump, you know, God Emperor of the US or whatever. Because you are so radical, but we really believe on this, you know. That argument exists, and I wanted to hear, you know, what your take would be on that.
Yeah, really important question that in the organizer space that I'm in, my political home, we ask this question of each other because we have to come up with answers. And so I think what's so unfortunate is like there's like levels, right? There's like the broader systemic level, like, dang, we are really captured by this two-party system. And that's like obviously a problem. Like, and that's not something that's going to change overnight. But we also will forever be captured by the two-party system if we don't push and agitate the parties, right? Like that's always gonna happen. And so I don't like when Democrats especially say, you know, vote. Your ancestors fought and died for you to vote. And then you say, okay, I'm gonna vote for candidates who reflect, you know, what I believe in. And they're like, whoa, like, you know, don't vote like that. I was like, well, you're actually not interested in the democratic process. What you're practicing some form of anti-democratic process by just trying to corral me into just support something I don't believe in. And that's unfortunate. Now, there's different ways that shows up. One way that shows up is that individually as a person, I can be responsive to that and say, no, I don't care. I'm never going to vote for Joe Biden, right? And like that's like a political decision and political commitment that people make, that I made, that I have to live with and that people are going to live with. There's also people who are like, well, I'm with the organization and we have to be committed to a political strategy. And part of our political strategy entails either voting or not voting for these particular reasons. And so that's why when Nyle said, you know, we have to do these things together because it impacts whether, you know, you're making a decision on behalf of yourself or you making a decision, you know, in alignment with the group. And so if people are concerned that, you know, by being too radical, we're going to push the country further right, I think that we should ask, well, what about all of the non-radical reforms that have been presented? Because there's also backlash to those reforms. So people were fighting for total student debt cancellation. And what happened? The right had a fit. Joe Biden canceled $10,000 for some people, $20,000 for a few more people, and guess what? The right is having a fit. Abolition is too radical. Oh, we can't do this. We're gonna lose people. Okay, let's propose the George Floyd Act. Has the George Floyd Act passed? Was there a backlash to the George Floyd Act? So was even the reforms that they want that are not radical, it's radicalizing the right, and the backlash is still gonna happen. So why not fight for the actual progressive thing? And so that's my frustration. I take some of it to be earnest, and people are just being like, whoa, we're gonna lose people. But I think once we take a step back, or we look at the field and say, the reforms that are being put on the table are not even working, and the backlash is still the same. If everything is just gonna be called socialism, let's just fight for socialism. Yeah, why not? Why not just fight? We can eliminate all this right now. Yep, universal health care, socialism. Free education, socialism. Free housing, socialism. You're absolutely right, DeSantis. That's what we're fighting for. That's exactly it. We're not even gonna play around. We're not gonna tiptoe, because we should be fighting for socialism, right? We should be fighting for socialist policies. We should be fighting for socialist ethics. And so I think that, well, if we keep playing the game of like we need to be more moderate, more centered, doesn't that also just move the country further to the right? Yeah, so that's it's like, these are feelings, or is it like, informed by analysis and strategy? And so defund candidates are losing. That makes a lot of sense, because people, again, just heard about defund like 15 minutes ago. Will they continue to lose in 5-10 years? Who knows? But that doesn't mean we can't stop talking about defund right now. Isn't this an opportunity to like teach more people about what it means and what it can look like? And so that is sort of where I'm coming from. The people who I struggle with, we're coming from that perspective. Like, how do we understand the terrain, make strategic decisions, which sometimes mean endorsing someone who isn't the most radical person, but this is what we have right now because we don't want this person to win. And the other times being like, no, like this is our hard line and this is what we're gonna fight for because this is the right thing to do. Thank you. That was a good question. Do you want to answer? No.
Hi. My name's Hadra. I actually don't live in New York. I live in London, and I'm visiting. I really enjoyed your talk.
You flew here for this? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I was like, the talk's
so
free,
special.
the flight's a little expensive. No, I was.
I'm gonna be in London on October 10th through the 15th.
Are you doing a talk?
I'll be at the IRR for the 50th anniversary.
I'll Google it. Cool.
Okay, yeah, cool.
I really enjoyed your talk, and I'm really happy I came today. I found what you said about abortion really interesting and about pushing people slowly. Definitely, if some of the people that have politically inspired me like left me behind a couple of years ago, I'd be like in a very different place. Yeah. But you've written this book now, and you've really thought about your politics, and you're continuing to develop them. But I wonder how you deal with relationships that aren't developing in line with yours or developing at all. Like friends that have decided that, oh yeah, like I'm socialist, or like, yeah, I'm on the left, but like they're not getting politically organized or they don't care. And I don't want to, like, I guess in my life, I don't want to think that leaving someone behind is the way to go. But I guess I just would like to hear about your experiences with that.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I would say some of my closest friends are not politically organized, right? They're not. Actually, my best, I don't know if she's watching, but she's about to get told on. But one of my best friends, who I like literally love to death, I would physically fight for her. I've almost have physically fought for her. Like that, I love this girl. When the Ferguson uprising was happening, she was in St. Louis. So I'm like running around doing like legal observant, trying to get people out of jail, whatever. And we're at dinner, and she's just like, I just want to go to a protest. And I was like, oh, you should like come with me because I've been inviting you for, she's like, no, like a real one where like stuff is like happening. And I was like, no, this is not like entertainment. Like you can't just pull up and like see what tear gas look like real quick and then go home. Like this is not that. And I swear to you, at dinner, we were in Central West End, a huge group of organizers came and like shut down the whole space. And she was so excited. She was like, oh my God, it's happening. And I was like, yeah, but Like, she was like, so she's like pulling out her phone. Like, oh my God, so embarrassing. So embarrassing. But, so that's 2014. When George Floyd was killed in 2020 in Texas, she called me as she was running towards a protest. And she was like, this isn't right. She's literally on the phone huffing and puffing. I'm like, what are you working out? What's going on? She's like, no, they're trying to like stop a group of people from going down the street, and we're about to go get in front of them. And so she's running down the street with me on the phone. If I get locked up, can you get me out? So that, it's like 2014 to 2020. I was so proud of her, so proud of her. And what I love about our friendship is that it doesn't have to be completely centered on like whether she identifies as an abolitionist. What's important to me is that we are able to have conversations about this because it shows up in our lives and how we respond to harm and how we respond to violence to people who hurt us. And so I don't need her and I to like have identical politics. I don't think that's fair for any sort of relationship. And where we disagree, I tell her like, hey, I don't know about this. She paid off her student loans. And I have to say, that's real good for you, but like, that I owe over $100,000 worth of student debt, and I know you had to make sacrifices to do that. Why do you think you're against it? Does it hurt you? Like those sorts of conversations just allow us to be in closer community together instead of her having to like subscribe to a set of politics that's already there. So that's like one relationship. A relationship that I am constantly worried about is my younger brother. Like I have a brother who's younger than me, and we fight all the time because he says homophobic stuff. And stuff that he doesn't even perceive as homophobic. He's just like, it's regular, because that's how homophobic it is. But I understand, because I grew up saying homophobic stuff too. I used to call him homophobic slurs, and now he's like, oh, so you woke now. I'm like, maybe, I just don't want to say that word. Like, that's a terrible word. It has all this stuff. And I can't say that he's like less homophobic now from like the last 10 years, but I know he doesn't say shit around me like that anymore. And I know that if it comes up, he know we're gonna fight about it. And so that's like, that's an interesting element in our relationship too, to know that that this isn't a safe space for that to happen. And so now you actually have to at least modify your behavior here, and hopefully that'll push you to think about doing that in another place. And so I just have different people in my lives, literally at different spiritual, political, whatever development. And I know there are people who look at me like, damn, you still eat fish, huh? You're not a vegan. That's wild. Because like you got all these other radical politics, but you like Snapper. And I'm like, yeah, bro, I know it's bad. I do love Snapper. And I'm trying, like, maybe I'm going to try to be a vegan. I like, I cut out chicken this year. I'm like working my way. But I have to understand there's a level of humility that I'm like learning and growing too. And again, because people are patient with me and push me and make fun of me, humor, I find is a great way to like push people to think differently about the world. I'm grateful for that, and I just try to practice that in my other relationships. Right? Yeah.
50. Oh, did you? Oh, I do. I'm hiding back here. Hi. Happy Wednesday. Thank you for being here. I forgot my question just that fast. I'm interested in your work within the legal system because I am currently considering going into law, and I'm studying for the LSAT, and every day I want to quit because I care about people that look like me. And I care about freedom, and sometimes it feels like within the legal system, it's very much an institution still. Mm-hmm. And so I was wondering if you could speak to sort of whether or not you feel optimistic or pessimistic about the potential for radical shifts and change within the legal field.
Yeah, just don't become a prosecutor. That's just don't. Go to corporate law and donate money to the movement before you become a cop. That's like the one ask I have of you. What do I think? I think that lots of lawyers do very terrible work. Like, that's just true. It's very unfortunate. It's very true. That's why so many of them make a lot of money, because you get paid a lot of money when you want to, protect corporations that are poisoning the earth. Like, it's very lucrative. That's why you graduate certain law schools, you can make $210,000 coming right out, because that's the work, starting salary, right? I think that there are a lot of other lawyers who do what I would call public interest work, who are very earnest and are very good people and are very committed to getting their client out of jail or providing some sense of relief to the family or to the community that's, undergoing a struggle. And I think that those lawyers, like I said, are very earnest and have really good hearts. One thing I learned in law school is that that's not enough for freedom. It's not enough to be earnest, and it's not enough to have good hearts. You have to be politically organized. And so where I find my most exciting sets of people who are doing work in the legal field are the people who are earnest, who have good hearts, and who have political commitments to freedom. And political commitments to freedom means that they're working with grassroots organizations, or they're in grassroots organizations, or they have a political home where they're constantly being challenged about their relationship to other people, their relationship to their job, their relationship to their families, their relationship to the planet, right? That's where I find my favorite kinds of lawyers, because they're not committed to being a lawyer for being a lawyer's sake. And they don't think they're saving people. They're just I have a very specific set of tools that I think that everyone should kind of have. I don't think that you should have to be a lawyer to get people out of jail. And they're committed to training people who are not lawyers to help get people out of jail. People who are in the NLG, I really have a lot of respect for the long history of the NLG. If you don't know the history of the NLG, please, please, please look into their history. I'm excited about what Civil Rights Corps is doing in DC, what Our City Defenders is doing in St. Louis, what Community Justice Project is doing in Miami, what Abolition Law Center, Amistad Law Project. Those organizations are my people, because I know that they have political commitments that's in addition to their hearts and in addition to the good work that they're doing, that they know that the fight is much broader than whether they win a case or not. And so I that is where I feel most comfortable. And then the other people, sometimes we're in coalition together, and I realize that this coalition is important. It is not my political home. And ultimately, I answer to my political home, And so that's sort of what I have. Good luck studying for the LSAT. It's a made-up test. It's really silly. It's really annoying. I wish I had tips, but I'm so old. It changed. It ain't even the same no more. You can take it at home. It's wow. I was taking the LSAT literally pregnant and in a room like this the whole time. Pen and paper. I know, so old school. But yeah, good luck. Yeah. Somewhere in the back. Y'all are so quiet, this is a library. It's so weird. I'm why are you so quiet?
So my name is Brent. Thank you for this talk. I heard you speak a couple of years ago on a Dream Defenders call, and that was actually kind of important to my journey in how I understand, how I speak about abolition. Spaces like these could kind of be a bubble, right? The type of person who comes down to the People's Forum for a book talk on a Wednesday. And these spaces are important. We learn from each other and push each other and stuff. But we spend a lot of time either talking to each other or focusing on other folks who are already politically engaged, whether it's conservatives or liberals. And as time has gone on, I'm less interested in that. And I'm trying to learn more about how we talk to people in our neighborhoods. And the lady who lives off the block for me might think the police are important. She might think, hey, this defund, that's white people shit. That's, not for us. And sometimes when I find myself talking to people in my neighborhood, I say things that I don't like. I try to downplay abolition. I'm like, no, it's not gonna happen overnight.
Yes.
Or I try to make a financial case. It's just like budgeting around your kitchen table, right? You're spending money on something that's not working, spend money on something else. And then afterwards, I think we should want to do the right thing, not just because it's financially prudent. So what are ways that we could talk to real people, not that you guys aren't real people, but what are ways that we can talk to real people in a way that makes it real, and people who are not necessarily as engaged in the academic side of things, lady who lives in the building up the block might not have read Becoming Abolitionists, even if I'll take her a copy later. But people who you might have 10 minutes to reach them. What are ways in which we can have those conversations?
Oh, very important question. I love this question. Well, one, you should talk to them. And so, you should talk to them. When you ask me about, why I still identify as a Christian, it's a place where I can talk to people who you would call regular, real people, right? So Trinity, we visited Trinity over Labor Day weekend, and I connected with the minister there. He's like, yeah, can you do a book talk at our church? I'm like, absolutely. It's like a dream come true. Like, that matters to me, right? My neighbor, where I just moved from, I would ask them, like, okay, what happens? Is this block hot? Like, do y'all call the police? What's going on here? So I do think that's important. When I, have conversations about the books, it was about this book in particular. It was really important to me to not only do radical spaces. That's why a lot of my book events, I prioritize places that have Black audiences across the spectrum. Like, all of my audiences have been absolutely diverse. The people I've been talking to, I prioritize community organizations. I prioritize schools, right? So I'm talking to like high school kids. So it's, it's very important to me that it's not just in the bubble. And I think that there are people who are really good at, politicizing or pushing the conversation with people who are already familiar. That's just not my particular lane. Even though I do think it's important, I try to speak usually where I'm invited. But what's important to me is that everyone is able to access the book, which is why it's written in a particular way. That's why when it came out, one agreement that I have with the publisher is that anyone who's incarcerated who wants a copy can get a copy for free. Anyone who can't afford a copy, send me an email, I'll mail you a copy. That matters to me more than just trying to, get a bunch of affirmation in a room with people who mostly agree with me. So I am so happy and so grateful to this particular space, because when I think it was Katie who asked, is this your first time here? More than half the room raised their hand. That's huge. I think that's a big deal. I'm not assuming the audience all are part of abolition or defund campaigns, even though a lot of y'all may be, and that's great. But I just assume that people will come because they're curious about something. And usually what I find at the end of some of these, at bookstores or at libraries or at schools, someone will say, oh yeah, I saw LeBron James retweeted you one day. I was like, oh, who's this person? And that's how I came here. I'm like, okay, cool. I'll take whatever I can get. That's real cool. Thank you for coming. And sometimes people yeah, my kid gave me your book. And we have been fighting over abolition, for the last year. And I said, okay, I'll go. Just stop talking to me about it. I'm happy I came. And so I think, to answer your question, I think if we want to talk to people who won't come to this room, we just go and talk to those people. That's why I really love all the organizations I've been naming, because they do political education with their members. They also are deeply, deeply, deeply engaged in community work. And what they also do is they're responsive to those people. So in St. Louis, when we were trying to close the workhouse, one thing that people were nervous about, if we close this jail, then what's gonna happen? Are we gonna be safe, And so Access St. Louis, Freedom Community Center, RC Defenders, CapCard, we say, okay, how do we fight for street violence interrupters in this particular neighborhood? Because that's what people are expressing that they want if we're gonna close the jail and reduce police presence here. And that's what they fought for, right? In Florida, in Miami, Liberty City, a historic Black neighborhood, Dream Defenders, what did they do? When they were knocking on doors for their defund campaign and Black people was like, I don't know, that's a little scary. We actually need this, this, and this. What did Dream Defenders do? They opened up a free health clinic. They created a healing and justice center. They have a mobile unit. So if you don't want to call the police to de-escalate some harmful situation, you can call Dream Defenders, and a doctor, a therapist, and a de-escalator will show up at your door. And so like when I learn about these kinds of like interventions that don't happen in rooms like this, but they come out of deep canvassing, that come out of door knocking, and people are not only just having those 10-minute conversations, we're going back to the room and we're saying, okay, this is what we hear. How do we respond to that? Like, that's amazing to me. And so I hope that we continue to lean into that, because ultimately that's how, our message, what we're trying to do, is going to reach people, and it's how people reach us. And that can only happen through those intentional relationship efforts. Yeah, thank you.
Give it up for Derecka Purnell.
Thank
Could do
you,
better than
thank
that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Nyle Fort. Thank you.
You want to open it up real quick? If anybody has a campaign that's going on, you only get like 10 seconds. What you could do is say, yo, this is my campaign. I'm going to stand right here. Come to me after if you want to talk to me about it. So is there anybody here that wants to shout out their organization, like 10 seconds for real, because we got to go? Please, this is a great time to do it.
Yes.
In Rochester in 2020, Daniel Prude was killed, and his family and community organizers are writing Daniel's law to remove police as the default response to mental health. So come talk to me if you want to learn about that.
Wait, who is me?
Oh, I'm Stanley Martin, and I'm from Rochester.
Thank you. Yes.
John McFarland, Vocal New York. Right now, we got a million campaigns, but the one I want to spotlight right now in 10 seconds is Halt Solitary Confinement. It's a coalition of organizations. We passed solitary confinement, but the implementation is now the problem. Okay, people are dying on Rikers Island. Come speak to us, please. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jay. If you live in Brooklyn, join Brooklyn Eviction Defense. Yes. We do on-the-ground work to stop evictions and others. What's up, John? Hey, Lee. All right, that's it.
Awesome. Y'all paying attention? Y'all keeping track? Okay, good.
Brent Maximin again. I'm the co-field leader for Black Men Build here in New York. We are a radical power building organization centered around building power among Black men. Blackmen.build.
Okay, Black Men Build.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda. I'm part of Unlock the Bar. We're a group of lawyers, law students, allied folks, systems impacted folks that are working to abolish the character and fitness part of the bar exam to make the legal profession more equitable, more accessible, more radical. So you can come talk to me. We're going to have a teach-in soon in a meeting. Yeah.
You paying attention? Okay, all right, good. Anyone else? Any other campaigns, petitions?
I'm involved in the Green New Deal in the UK. There is a US movement, which I think is headed up by Leah Thompson. She's a really vocal activist in the space, and she's based in California. But it essentially focuses on ensuring there's a just transition and a Green New Deal that doesn't leave any communities behind. So we focus on something that's going to help our environment, but also protect the communities that haven't been harming it in the first place. Thanks.
Yeah, shout out to Sunrise.
All right, we're just gonna ask one thing before we close. One thing we're asking of everybody here. Invite one person in your life that you have either not invited to something or you have and they have not shown up to a political thing, to a freedom thing. It could be a talk, it could be a protest, it could be something you put on and you give some people in your house and y'all get some margaritas going, whatever your thing is. But please, this is what we're asking. We're very serious. Invite one person, it could be a family member, a friend, a colleague, a coworker, your neighbor, to a political thing. And we just want to make sure that we're doing this work and not just having these conversations. So thank you so much. Let's give it up again for Derecka Purnell.
Thank you again. Ooh, hello, everyone. Thank you again to Derecka and Nyle for having this amazing, amazing conversation. And thank you again to Astra House for making this book possible. Just make it really easy for you in their ask. This Saturday, we're having another book talk with Dr. CBS and Jody Dean on Organize, Fight, Win, which is a book on Black communist women's writing. So if you're really interested in that, you should come check it out. But also, as we all talked about today, we want you to take this information and make sure it's not just in a bubble and you take it to your communities. So whether it's here, whether it's somewhere else, make sure you invite someone, bring someone into your political work, or even get more politically involved yourself. But again, thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and have a good night. Thank you so much.